May 1942. Pearl Harbor, territory of Hawaii. In a windowless basement, heavy with cigarette smoke, sweat, and the dry rattle of paper being turned too quickly, the war begins to change its shape. Electric fans push warm air over desks crowded with intercept logs, grease pencil marks, half-empty coffee cups, and men who have not slept enough to trust their own eyes. Outside, the Pacific glitters under a calm sun. Down here, beneath the harbor, still haunted by the wreckage of December 7th, every sound is close and urgent. Typewriter keys snap. A radio speaker hisses. Someone mutters over a column of Japanese call signs. And in the middle of it all, the officers of Station Hypo lean over fragments of an enemy plan that should not yet be visible to anyone at all. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort does not look like the man on whom the Pacific may soon depend. He works in a red smoking jacket, slippers, and the kind of exhaustion that has become a second skin. Around him, code breakers and intelligence officers sift through pieces of JN-25, the Japanese naval code, never seeing the whole message at once, only shards. A date here, a call sign there, a reference to carriers, escorts, fuel, objectives hidden behind designators. Each intercepted message is a broken bone from a skeleton they are trying to rebuild before it starts moving. Rochefort knows what failure would mean. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Imperial Japanese Navy is preparing another blow. If they strike first again, America may lose what remains of its balance in the Pacific. The codebreakers keep seeing one designation return, like a knife flashing in and out of darkness. AF. AF needs supplies. AF appears in traffic tied to an operation of major scale. AF is linked to carriers. AF is linked to timing. The men in the basement believe AF is Midway, the small coral atoll northwest of Hawaii. But belief is not enough. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz cannot gamble the surviving carriers of the Pacific Fleet on intuition. Not after Pearl Harbor. Not after the Coral Sea. Not with the Japanese still stronger on paper. He needs certainty, or as close to certainty as war ever allows. So the intelligence staff proposes a test. Midway will send an uncoded message saying its water distillation plant has failed and the island is short of fresh water. Then they will listen. The message goes out into the Pacific like bait dropped into deep water. Hours later, the answer comes back from Japanese traffic. AF is short of water. In that instant, the room tightens. There it is. Not theory. Not hope. Confirmation. Midway is the target. The Japanese are coming for the atoll, and they are coming with carriers. The intelligence officers now have more than a location. They can sketch shape and sequence. The operation is not a raid. It is a trap meant to finish what Pearl Harbor began, to draw out the American carriers and destroy them in a decisive battle. If the estimate is right, the enemy will arrive in early June. If the estimate is wrong, Nimitz may be sending his fleet into empty ocean while the real blow falls somewhere else. At Pacific Fleet Headquarters, Nimitz listens as intelligence officer Commander Edwin Layton and the men from Hypo lay out the case. He is quiet, broad-shouldered, composed, a Texan admiral with a face that does not waste movement. He has every reason to doubt. Washington disagrees with Pearl Harbor on pieces of the picture. Some believe the Japanese may strike the Aleutians, or split attention across multiple objectives. Nimitz hears the disagreement and keeps coming back to the same demand. Be specific. Not what the enemy could do, but what he intends to do. The answer that forms in that room will carry the weight of thousands of lives. Midway, early June. 4 carriers in the striking force. Enough confidence to move the fleet. Enough confidence to set an ambush. That is the moment this story turns. Not when bombs fall. Not when dive bombers roll over into their attacks. Not when carriers burn. It turns here, in and a headquarters office, and a basement full of static, because Nimitz decides to trust what the hidden war has revealed. He will not wait behind Pearl Harbor's defenses. He will not let Midway stand alone as bait without teeth. He will place his carriers northeast of the island and force the Japanese to sail into a fight they think they have arranged for someone else. In the weeks ahead, every available aircraft will be pushed toward Midway. Every deck loaded, every pilot briefed, every repair rushed. But first comes the decision. First comes the Admiral accepting that the enemy's secret has been dragged into the light, and that the light must be used before it flickers out. In the days that follow, Pearl Harbor becomes a machine running on urgency. Orders move across desks. Signal lamps flash after dark. Engines are opened, patched, closed, and tested again. Men who know how weak the American position still is do their work with the silence of people who understand that fear wastes time. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz stands at the center of it, receiving fragments of intelligence, operational reports, maintenance estimates, and aircraft strength returns that never seem generous enough for the task ahead. He knows exactly what is being asked of him. The United States Navy has only a handful of fleet carriers left in the Pacific, and every one of them matters. Lose them here, and the road to Hawaii may lie open. Commit them too late, and Midway will be isolated and smashed before help can arrive. Commander Edwin Layton brings in the latest estimate. The Japanese striking force will approach Midway in the first week of June. 4 first-line carriers are expected in the main attack group. They are not just any carriers. They are veterans of Pearl Harbor, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Hard names now familiar to American intelligence. Names tied to precision, experience, and a record of victory stretching from Hawaii to the Indian Ocean. The Japanese believe they still hold the initiative. They believe American morale is brittle, American readiness incomplete, American commanders reactive. Above all, they believe the U.S. carriers can be lured out and destroyed in a single coordinated blow. Nimitz studies the estimate and sees the danger clearly, but he also sees something else. For the first time since December 7th, the enemy is moving according to an American timetable. There are still doubts. Washington has its own interpretation of the traffic. Some officers suspect a wider operation, perhaps a strong move in the North Pacific, perhaps a split effort intended to confuse. Nimitz does not ignore those warnings. He weighs them, then comes back to the hard center of the problem. Midway is the decisive point. Even if the Aleutians are struck as a diversion, Midway remains the place where the Japanese expect to force battle. That is where the carriers must be waiting. It is not a perfect picture. It never is. Yet war rarely grants certainty. It grants glimpses, and then demands action before those glimpses fade. The most pressing question is brutally simple. What ships can actually fight? USS Enterprise and USS Hornet are available under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, who has stepped in for Vice Admiral William Halsey after illness removes one of the Navy's most aggressive carrier commanders from the coming battle. Halsey's absence is a blow. His reputation for striking hard and fast has become part of the fleet's nervous system, but Spruance, quiet, deliberate, and highly intelligent, will have to do the job now. Then there is USS Yorktown. Only days earlier, she fought in the Coral Sea and came back scarred, torn open by bomb damage. Her condition serious enough that initial estimates suggest she may need months in the yard. Nimitz asks how long. The answer is long enough to miss the battle. He rejects that answer. At Pearl Harbor, Naval Shipyard, repair crews swarm over Yorktown with astonishing force. Welders throw sparks into the Hawaiian night. Damaged plating is cut away. Electrical lines are restored. Fuel systems are checked. Men carry tools at a run. The ship is still wounded, but wounded is not dead. Nimitz does not need perfection. He needs another flight deck in the fight. Every hour gained may mean more fighters in the air, more torpedo planes launched, more chance that one American strike finds the enemy first. The order is clear. Get her ready. Midway itself becomes a forward trap layered with whatever strength can be scraped together. Marines, Navy aviators, Army Air Forces crews, patrol seaplanes, land-based bombers, anti-aircraft batteries, coastal guns, radar operators, fuel dumps, ammunition stocks. The island is tiny, exposed, and vulnerable. But Nimitz intends to make it sting. Midway's aircraft will not merely defend the atoll. They will search, harass, and, if fortune favors them, damage the approaching Japanese force before the carrier battle even begins. Every extra bomb dropped on an enemy deck could matter. Every delay forced on Japanese timing could matter. Nimitz is building layers of resistance around a single idea. Let the Japanese reveal themselves, then strike with carriers from concealment. Somewhere in these tense briefings comes the sentence that men around Nimitz will remember in spirit, if not always in the exact same wording. He makes clear that Midway must be held and that the enemy can and will be met. His manner is not theatrical. He does not need to pound a desk or raise his voice. The confidence is colder than that, more dangerous. This is not bravado. It is calculation backed by intelligence. The Japanese have laid out a plan in coded fragments, and now the commander of the Pacific Fleet is arranging steel around that plan before it can unfold. In a war already full of desperate gestures, this is something rarer, a disciplined gamble. As orders are issued, the shape of the ambush becomes real. Spruance will take Enterprise and Hornet northeast of Midway. Yorktown, if the repair miracle succeeds, will join under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, the senior carrier commander. Their carriers are to remain hidden beyond the horizon, silent if possible, positioned where they can strike once Midway reports contact. Search planes will range far. PBY Catalinas will patrol the dark sea lanes. Submarines will move into supporting positions. Timing will be everything. Too early, and the Americans may disclose themselves before the Japanese commitment is complete. Too late, and Midway may be wrecked while the carrier force gropes for contact in open ocean. At night, Nimitz works under lamps that throw hard light across maps of the Central Pacific. His finger traces routes through empty blue space that is not empty at all. Every coordinate hides uncertainty, weather fronts, search gaps, delayed signals, human fatigue, mechanical failure, wrong assumptions. He knows his aviators are less experienced than many of their opponents. He knows American torpedoes cannot yet be fully trusted. He knows the Japanese flight decks have been handled by masters. But he also knows something they do not. He knows where they are coming. He knows roughly when. And because he knows, he can place his outnumbered force at the point of decision instead of chasing shadows after the blow has already landed. By the end of May, the orders are no longer hypothetical. The fleet is moving. Carriers slide out of Pearl Harbor under a Hawaiian sun that glints on their gray hulls. Sailors line the decks. Some wave. Some stare back at the harbor entrance in silence. Tugboats peel away. Destroyers take station. Below decks, pilots memorize recognition silhouettes and attack doctrine. Ordnance crews stack bombs. Mechanics secure spare parts wherever they can fit. In ready rooms and wardrooms, officers study charts of Midway, projected enemy approach routes, and the likely composition of the Japanese carrier striking force. The ocean ahead looks calm. Calm is a lie. Nimitz watches them go, knowing he has committed everything that can be spared. There will be no larger reserve appearing over the horizon to save a mistake. This force is the answer. This force is the ambush. And as it steams north and west toward a point of rendezvous hidden in the vastness of the Pacific, the Admiral remains behind at Pearl Harbor with the weight of his decision settling into fact. He has listened to the whispers drawn from enemy code traffic. He has bet the future of the Pacific Fleet that those whispers are true. Now all that remains is to see whether the trap will close before Japan realizes it has sailed directly into it. Across the Pacific, the Japanese combined fleet moves with the confidence of a navy that has not yet been forced to doubt itself. The formation is immense, spread across hundreds of miles of ocean, layered with carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transports, and supporting forces moving toward their assigned roles in a plan of enormous complexity. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto has designed the operation to finish the work left undone after Pearl Harbor. Midway will be struck. The island will be occupied. The American carriers, expected to rush in from Pearl Harbor to save it, will be drawn into battle and destroyed. On paper, it is elegant. In practice, it depends on surprise, coordination, and one assumption so deeply embedded that almost no one on the Japanese side questions it. The Americans do not know what is coming. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo commands the carrier striking force, the Kido Butai, the same hard-hitting arm that helped shake the Pacific months earlier. His flag flies in a kagi. Around him steam, kaga, soryu, and hiryu, their decks crowded with veteran pilots, armorers, and deck crews who have learned how to turn carriers into instruments of sudden violence. Their aircraft are among the best in the world for this kind of war. A-6 M0 fighters, D-3A dive bombers, B-5N attack planes, machines that have already burned airfields, ships, and cities across the Western Pacific and beyond. On these decks are men who have won again and again. They know risk, but they also know rhythm. And victory has a way of making rhythm feel like destiny. Before dawn, as the carrier force nears Midway, the sea is dark and smooth beneath a thin wash of early light. Wind brushes the flight decks. Engines begin to warm. Deck crews move in practiced patterns, signaling with paddles and arms, guiding aircraft into position under low red lights that leave faces half seen. Fuel hoses are handled carefully. Bomb carts rattle. Torpedoes are checked. Pilots climb into cockpits and settle straps over flight gear damp with sweat long before the morning heat has fully arrived. Somewhere ahead is a small American atoll. Somewhere beyond that, perhaps, the larger prize. Nagumo's force is preparing to throw the first punch of the day, not yet aware that American search planes are already out over the ocean looking for him. On Midway itself, the morning tension feels different. Here the defenders know the blow is coming, even if they do not know the exact minute or the exact bearing of the first aircraft. Radar sets sweep. Lookouts scan the horizon. Marines stand by their guns. Pilots wait near aircraft that have been dispersed and armed. The island is small enough that no man on it can pretend he is far from danger. There is coral dust underfoot, heat building with the sun, and the strange stillness that sometimes settles before battle begins, when everyone is awake and ready and nothing has happened yet. Then the messages start to sharpen. Patrol planes push contact reports into the network, bearings, distances, enemy ships sighted, fragments that begin to form a picture. The Japanese are there. One of the first critical sightings comes from a Midway-based patrol aircraft. The report is hurried and imperfect, but it is enough. Enemy ships, carriers in the area, contact. Once those words are in American hands, the battle changes from anticipation to action. On the island, the alarm sounds. Men run to stations. Engines start. Bombers and fighters claw into the sky. At sea, farther northeast, the American carriers receive word that the enemy has been found. For the commanders aboard Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, there is no longer any need to imagine the approaching blow. It has shape now, direction, reality. The first Japanese strike lifts from the carrier decks in waves, climbing eastward into the morning light. More than 100 aircraft head for Midway, escorted by Zero fighters that range ahead and above them like hunting birds. Below, Nagumo keeps part of his striking power in reserve, a doctrine shaped by experience and caution. If American ships are discovered, he wants a second punch ready. It is a reasonable decision. It is also one that will become more dangerous with every passing minute, because a reserve force on a carrier deck is not merely strength held back. It is bombs, torpedoes, fuel lines, and armed aircraft waiting inside a space where timing can turn efficiency into catastrophe. When the Japanese planes reach Midway, the island erupts. Anti-aircraft fire climbs in black bursts around the incoming formations. Tracers streak upward. Bombs fall across runways. Fuel storage areas, hangars, gun positions, and installations packed into the narrow space of the atoll. Sand and coral leap into the air. Smoke rolls across the field. Aircraft on the ground burn. Men are thrown flat by blast and concussion. Telephone lines go dead. Yet Midway does not collapse. The defenses hold long enough to answer. Fighters rise to contest the raid, many of them outdated or outclassed, their pilots often facing veteran Japanese airmen in faster, more agile machines. The result is savage. American fighters are cut apart in the sky. Some come apart in flame. Some tumble into the sea. Some pilots press attacks that have almost no chance of success because there is no other choice left to them. The Japanese strike leader reports back that a second attack on Midway will be necessary. That message reaches Nagumo with enormous consequence. It tells him the first strike has not neutralized the island. If Midway's airfield is still operating, then land-based bombers may continue to attack his carriers. He must either launch another blow against the island or be prepared to strike enemy ships if they appear. At this precise moment, he does not yet have proof that American carriers are nearby. Doctrine and circumstances push him toward rearming the reserve aircraft for another attack on Midway. In hangar spaces below deck, weapons are shifted. Armorers move bombs. Torpedoes are handled. Fueling continues. Aircraft are cycled and prepared. The work is routine only until something interrupts it. The interruption begins from Midway itself. American aircraft launch piecemeal against Nagumo's carriers. Marine SBDs, os SB-2As, Army B-17S, coming in from altitude. TBF Avengers. B-26 Marauders, flying low and fast through walls of anti-aircraft fire and fighter opposition. They do not arrive in one coordinated hammer blow. They come in fragments, separated by type, speed, altitude, and sheer confusion. Many attacks achieve little or nothing in direct material terms. Bombs miss, torpedoes fail, aircraft are shot down, crews die in the water or vanish in flame. But every raid forces the Japanese carriers to maneuver. Every alarm pulls fighters downward. Every incoming attack interrupts deck routines, complicates recovery cycles, and injects uncertainty into decisions that must already be made under time pressure. The American strikes are often brave to the point of tragedy, and yet even failed attacks have value. They keep Nagumo reacting. One of the most dramatic of these early attacks comes low over the sea. American torpedo planes and attack bombers press straight toward the carriers through a storm of gunfire. Japanese fighters tear into them. Tracers stitch across fuselages. Aircraft stagger, break apart, or plunge into the water. Still they come. A B-26 roars, and so low and so fast that it seems for a moment as if it might smash directly into Akagi's bridge. Officers on the flagship feel the aircraft pass close enough to shock the senses. It misses, but the image remains. The Americans are not waiting to be perfect. They are attacking with whatever they have, from wherever they can. Aboard the Japanese carriers, the operational picture is starting to blur. Midway still needs another strike. Enemy air attacks are arriving from the island. Reports begin to suggest that American surface forces may be in the area. Then comes the most dangerous ingredient of all in carrier warfare: delay. Not a dramatic delay that anyone recognizes in the moment as fatal. Just enough time for armed aircraft to remain aboard. Just enough time for decks and hangars to fill with activity. Just enough time for the next American wave, still unseen, to be somewhere out beyond the horizon, searching for the exact patch of ocean where the balance of the Pacific is about to tilt. Far to the northeast, aboard the American carriers. The air groups are already committed. Their launches have not been neat. They have not been perfectly coordinated. Timing, distance, weather, and the sheer friction of carrier warfare have pulled the formations apart almost from the moment they left their decks. Fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo squadrons are no longer moving as one carefully arranged weapon. They are hunting across a huge sky in pieces. Some commanders press forward on dead reckoning. Some aircraft struggle with fuel. Some pilots scan an ocean so empty it feels cruel. Yet beneath all of that uncertainty lies one fact that matters more than any other. The Japanese carriers are out there, and American aviators are closing. The torpedo squadrons reach the enemy first. From Hornet comes Torpedo Squadron, 8 flying obsolete TBD devastators that are too slow, too vulnerable, and too exposed for what they are being asked to do. From Enterprise and Yorktown come other torpedo squadrons pushing in on separate tracks, also without the fighter cover they need. They descend to attack altitude and continue anyway. Ahead of them, the Japanese combat air patrol is waiting. Zeros circling above the fleet. Fast, agile, and flown by veterans who know exactly how to kill this kind of approach. Anti-aircraft fire begins to rise from the ships below. The American torpedo planes keep coming in low over the water, wings nearly skimming the sea, every crewman aware that there is almost no place to hide. It becomes slaughter. One by one, the devastators are cut down. Zeros slash through them with cannon and machine gun fire. Black bursts of shipboard fire open around them. Aircraft catch fire, cartwheel, burst apart, or vanish into white splashes beneath the carrier wakes. Still, the formations continue their runs because once committed, there is no graceful escape. Ensign George Gay of Torpedo 8 sees planes falling all around him until almost nothing remains of the squadron. Other torpedo units meet the same fate. Pilots and radio men press on through a wall of steel and flame, trying to drop torpedoes that in many cases will run badly or fail altogether. Their attacks achieve almost no hits. By the cold measure of material result, they seem to have accomplished nothing. But they have changed the sky. Nagumo's carriers are now hard over in evasive maneuvers, turning sharply to comb torpedo tracks and avoid low-level attacks. The Zeros have been dragged down from altitude to finish the torpedo planes near the wave tops. The Japanese combat air patrol is no longer where it most needs to be. The fleet's formation has been disrupted. Deck operations are strained. Officers are reacting to one crisis after another, looking low, looking out, looking at the immediate threat. That is when the next Americans arrive, high above, almost missed by fate itself. The dive bombers are finally finding the target. Enterprise Air Group Commander Wade McCluskey has been searching with fuel running down and options collapsing. Then he spots a clue, a lone Japanese destroyer, Arashi, racing to rejoin the fleet after attacking an American submarine. McCluskey reads the wake like a pointing finger and follows it. Soon the gray shapes of the Japanese carriers emerge from the clouds and glare below. It is the moment every aviator in the strike has been searching for. 4 enemy carriers, decks busy, ships maneuvering, the enemy exposed. McCluskey's formation and the Yorktown dive bombers arrive almost together, though not in perfect union. For a few suspended seconds, the Japanese are between dangers. Fighters low, decks crowded, refueling and rearming activity below. Aircraft in vulnerable states on hangar and flight decks. Then the American squadrons roll over into their dives. The sky seems to open. SBD Dauntless dive bombers tip forward and drop steeply. Dive brakes shuddering, pilots staring down narrow sights at ships that grow larger with terrifying speed. Wind screams over fuselages. G-forces press hard. Rear gunners brace uselessly against the dive, eyes scanning for fighters. On Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. Men on deck look up and see shapes falling out of the sun. Alarms sound too late. Guns begin to track too late. The attack has arrived at the worst possible second. Bombs hit in rapid succession. Kaga is struck multiple times. Explosions tear through her flight deck and ignite fueled aircraft packed for action. Sheets of fire roll through the ship. Soryu is hit and quickly enveloped in flames that race below into spaces crowded with munitions and aviation fuel. Akagi, for a heartbeat. Seems she might escape with near misses. But then a bomb crashes down and detonates among armed and fueled aircraft. The effect is catastrophic. What moments earlier had been 3 functioning carriers becomes 3 burning wrecks, each one transformed by secondary explosions. Smoke, heat, and spreading destruction. Men are hurled across decks. Fire parties rush into infernos that no human courage can master. Ammunition cooks off. Internal communications collapse into fragments and screams. In less than 10 minutes, the core of Japan's carrier striking force has been shattered. The shock is almost beyond comprehension. These are not merchant ships, not cruisers caught alone. These are the carriers that carried Japan from victory to victory, the heart of the Kido Butai, and now 3 of them are mortally wounded in the space of a single devastating attack. On the American side, the pilots pull out of their dives stunned by what they have seen. Some cheering, some too focused on escape to feel anything yet. All of them knowing the battle has just turned from desperate defense into something else entirely. But it is not over. One carrier still lives. Hiryu, undamaged and deadly, remains somewhere nearby with aircraft ready to strike back. Even as Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu burn against the horizon. The surviving Japanese carrier begins to gather the blow that may yet reopen the battle and punish the Americans for every moment of triumph they have just seized. Even as smoke climbs from Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu in towering black pillars, the battle refuses to settle. Fire and ruin spread across 3 Japanese carriers, but out beyond the burning ships, Hiryu is still alive. Still maneuvering, still capable of sending trained air crews into the sky. For the men aboard her, the shock of seeing sister carriers smashed in minutes does not erase discipline, it hardens it. Flight deck crews move with desperate speed. Pilots are briefed, engines turn over, signal flags rise and fall. Somewhere out there, the American carriers that delivered this disaster are still within reach. If Hiryu can hit them hard enough, if she can cripple or sink one or more, the day may yet be wrestled back from the edge. Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, commanding aboard Hiryu, is not a man inclined toward passivity. He understands the gravity of the moment instantly. The battle has become a contest of reaction and endurance. If he waits too long, American search planes and dive bombers will return. If he strikes quickly, there is still a chance to cut into the American force before it can regroup. So Hiryu launches. The first Japanese counter-strike heads out over the Pacific with the urgency of men who know their fleet is bleeding behind them. Dive bombers fly toward contact reports that are incomplete, but good enough. They are searching for American flat tops in a sky full of glare, cloud, and haze. Below them, the ocean looks endless, indifferent, almost peaceful. Then shapes appear. American ships. Gray hulls cutting white wakes. A carrier among them. It is Yorktown. For the Americans aboard her, the earlier success against the Japanese carriers has brought only a brief surge of relief. No one who understands carrier war believes the enemy is finished just because flames are visible on the horizon. Lookouts keep scanning. Radar operators track incoming formations. Fighter directors work feverishly to place defending aircraft where they are needed. Gun crews stand by their weapons, stripped to sweat-soaked shirts, hands blackened from powder and grease. On the flight deck, the ship remains alive with movement. Aircraft being recovered, refueled, armed, prepared again. Then comes the warning. Enemy planes inbound. Yorktown turns into the attack. Engines driving her hard as gunners begin firing. American fighters dive into the incoming Japanese formation, breaking it apart but not stopping it. The attackers press on through smoke bursts and tracers. Then the dive bombers roll over. Bombs fall toward the ship with the same terrifying certainty the Americans had inflicted on the Japanese carriers earlier. Yorktown maneuvers sharply. One bomb misses. Another misses close, but several find her. Explosions rip into the carrier, punching through the deck and blasting compartments below. Fire breaks out. Smoke pours upward. Men are thrown down by shock and blast. Splinters slash through exposed crews. For a few violent minutes it seems possible that Yorktown is done. Yet the ship does not die. Damage control parties move at once into heat, smoke, and darkness. Hoses are dragged. Valves are shut. Fires are contained. Wounded men are carried clear while others step into their places. Engineering crews fight to restore power. Communication circuits begin to return in fragments. The discipline on board is astonishing, the sort of hard-trained reflex that turns survival from luck into practice. Before long, Yorktown is making way again. Smoke still hangs over her. Scars are visible, but she is not sinking. To Japanese scouts and strike leaders, however, damage and confusion can deceive. In the haze of combat, they may believe they have crippled one carrier and perhaps forced it out of battle. Hiryu launches again. This second strike goes out with torpedo planes, and by now the pattern of the battle has become brutally clear. Carrier warfare is not one blow, but a chain of sightings, launches, recoveries, guesses, and sudden violence. The Japanese crews find Yorktown once more, or what they believe is another American carrier. The ship's damage has been so effectively controlled that to the attackers, she may look like a fresh target. They come in low this time. Torpedo bombers skimming the sea while American fighters and anti-aircraft guns tear into them. The attack is savage and close. Torpedo planes weave through curtains of fire, holding steady long enough to launch. Yorktown turns hard to avoid the tracks racing toward her hull. Some pass astern. Some miss ahead, but not all. Torpedoes slam into the carrier's side with massive underwater force. The ship shudders. Compartments flood. Power fails again. The list begins. This time, the damage is far worse. Inside the carrier, lights go out, passageways fill with smoke and confusion. Water pushes into spaces that had only just been made safe. Men work by instinct and dim emergency lighting, struggling to contain flooding that spreads with relentless pressure. The list increases. Machinery falters. The great ship that had survived Coral Sea damage, then rushed from the yard to fight at Midway, now hangs in the balance under a fresh combination of bomb and torpedo hits. Captain Elliot Buckmaster and his officers assess what remains possible. Damage control continues as long as it can. But eventually the order comes for much of the crew to abandon ship. Sailors climb down nets and ropes into waiting destroyers and boats, leaving behind a carrier that still floats but seems mortally wounded. Some pause to look back. Yorktown is wounded, listing, scarred, and eerily still compared to the violence that surrounded her moments earlier. Oil spreads on the water. Debris drifts. The smell of cordite, fuel, smoke, and hot metal hangs over everything. For the Japanese, this appears to be revenge, proof that Hiryu has struck back hard enough to restore balance. For the Americans, it is a bitter reminder that even a battle turning their way can demand blood at every stage. But Hiryu has revealed herself. While Yorktown suffers, American scouts are still searching. Reports flow between ships. Bearings are compared. Commanders piece together the likely location of the surviving Japanese carrier. The need is urgent now. As long as Hiryu remains operational, she can launch again. Another strike might find Enterprise or Hornet. Another strike might transform a day of triumph into a mutual disaster. So the Americans do what carrier forces must always do after being hit. They prepare the answer. On Enterprise and Hornet, aircraft are armed and sent out once more. Pilots who have already flown through tension search uncertainty, and combat now head back toward the enemy in the late afternoon light. Fatigue is setting into everyone. Fuel margins are tighter, nerves are frayed, yet the essential task is simple. Find Hiryu before darkness hides her. At last, the scout reports and follow-up sightings converge. There she is, a lone surviving Japanese fleet carrier, still moving, still defended, but now isolated against a broad ocean that no longer protects her. American dive bombers line up for their chance. As they descend, the final chapter of the carrier duel begins to take shape. The ship that struck back, the last sharp blade in Nagumo's force, is about to face the same terrible judgment that fell on the others. Late in the afternoon, the American dive bombers descend on Hiryu through a ski stained by smoke and fading light. The long day has already consumed squadrons, shattered nerves, and burned 3 Japanese carriers into wrecks. But the battle still has one final answer to demand. Below, Hiryu cuts through the Pacific with determination that borders on defiance. Her escorts throw up anti-aircraft fire. Fighters try to rise and intercept. On her decks and within her hull are men who know exactly what has happened to the rest of the striking force, and who know that if their ship goes down, the Japanese carrier spearhead that came to destroy the American fleet will cease to exist as an effective weapon. Still, they fight. The dauntless bombers commit to their dives. They come down hard and steep, pilots holding their aim on a moving rectangle of steel as wind screams over wings and the ship swells larger in the sights. Gunners below throw shells upward in bursts that flash black and orange around the attackers. Tracers reach, fragments whip through air. Yet enough Americans break through. Bombs fall. Hiryu is hit. Explosions rip into the carrier, and fire spreads with the speed and violence that only aviation fuel, armed aircraft, and packed hangar spaces can produce. Flames race across the deck. Smoke boils upward in thick columns visible for miles. Men run into infernos to fight them. Others are trapped by blast, heat, collapsing metal, and toxic fumes. The carrier that had struck back against Yorktown now joins the others in ruin. With that, the decisive phase of the Battle of Midway is effectively over. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, the veterans of Pearl Harbor and the core of Japan's offensive striking power, have been knocked out in a single battle. Night begins to close over the Pacific, but darkness does not bring peace. Burning ships still glow on the horizon. Survivors cling to rafts and wreckage in black water. Destroyers prowl through smoke and oil slicks, searching for men while guarding against submarines and renewed attack. Signals continue to flash. Reports continue to arrive. Commanders on both sides are still trying to understand the scale of what has happened. In the American force, relief mixes with disbelief. On the Japanese side, disbelief hardens into catastrophe. A plan built on surprise, precision, and control has collapsed into confusion and irreversible loss. Back at Pearl Harbor, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz receives the reports as they come in, not all at once, not neatly. War never arrives as a complete sentence. Fragments first, contacts, strikes launched, enemy carriers burning. Yorktown hit, another enemy carrier found, another burning. Yet with each report, the shape of the result becomes unmistakable. The intelligence that had warned him of Midway had been right. The gamble he accepted had worked. The ambush had closed around the Japanese force and broken it at the point where it was most dangerous. What had been decided in code rooms, map rooms, and hurried repair docks now stands written across the Pacific in smoke, wreckage, and silence. The battle is not bloodless for the Americans. Yorktown, though still afloat for the moment, is grievously wounded and will not survive the aftermath. Air crews have been butchered in torpedo attacks that nearly wiped out entire squadrons. Pilots and gunners who helped make victory possible will never return to their carriers. Midway's defenders have paid in aircraft, lives, and shattered ground installations. This is not a triumph clean enough for celebration without grief. It is a brutal victory, won by intelligence, courage, sacrifice, and timing so narrow that another set of minutes might have produced a very different world. For Japan, the cost is profound. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Gon. Along with them go experienced pilots, flight deck crews, maintenance specialists, and irreplaceable institutional skill. Carriers can be built. Air groups and combat experience are harder to replace, especially in the middle of a vast oceanic war. The Imperial Japanese Navy still remains dangerous. It still has battleships, cruisers, submarines, more carriers elsewhere, and the will to fight on. But after Midway, it no longer moves through the Pacific with the same unquestioned initiative. Something essential has been taken from it. And for the United States, something equally important has been restored. Since Pearl Harbor, the Pacific War had felt like a series of blows endured and positions threatened. At Midway, that motion begins to reverse. Not instantly, not completely. Guadalcanal, the Solomons, the Central Pacific, the Long Island campaigns and sea battles ahead will demand years more blood. But the psychological and operational shift begins here. Here, the Japanese offensive is checked. Here, American commanders prove that intelligence can shape battle before the first bomb falls. Here, a smaller, wounded carrier force meets a stronger enemy and destroys the heart of its striking arm. The words often associated with Nimitz after the battle reflect the cold clarity with which he had faced the moment. He had trusted the intelligence. He had acted before the enemy believed he could. He had placed ships not where fear suggested they should wait, but where knowledge said the enemy must go. That is the true answer to the question of what Chester W. Nimitz said when intelligence revealed Japan's Midway plan. He said it with decisions. He said it by committing Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown into an ambush no cautious admiral was supposed to attempt. He said it by betting that hidden information, correctly read, could outweigh raw Japanese strength. And when the battle was done, the Pacific itself seemed to confirm the judgment. By dawn after Midway, the ocean still carries the wreckage of both fleets. But it carries something else now as well. Momentum has shifted. The Japanese came expecting to write the next chapter of victory. Instead, they sailed into a battle the Americans were waiting to fight. In basement rooms full of intercepted static, in Nimitz's headquarters above Pearl Harbor, and finally in the burning skies over the Pacific. The future changed course.